right, welcome to another episode of the Spurs Takeover. I'm your host, Joe Garcia, and we're going to be joined by our guest and our co-host here, Wesley Perkins, as we discuss a Spurs loss to the Miami Heat. The Spurs went ahead and split this four-game road trip at 2-2, and they lose to the Heat by a final score of 106 to 100. Going into this game, the Spurs were ninth place in the Western Conference, and they didn't do themselves any favors tonight. Their overall record, is 17-22, and depending on what happens, we're gonna wake up and see where the standings are gonna be in the morning. Maybe they'll move down to the 10th. Maybe they'll stay in the ninth. Maybe by some miracle, we blink and all of a sudden they're the eighth seed again. So I doubt that though, because the Memphis Grizzlies have been playing at a really high level, and this young team is looking really good. Except for the Spurs, they look really good offensively. And going into this game, you thought, oh, that trend's going to continue, and it was the opposite end of the spectrum. Tonight, the Spurs look good defensively, for the first half of the game, that they just couldn't knock down shots, and then they started knocking down shots in the latter part of the second quarter. But unfortunately, it was kind of too little too late because they just couldn't get over that hump come the fourth quarter. The third quarter, they usually come out flat. Spurs, I think they did a valiant effort. They did good. They did good, I thought, to keep themselves in the game, and they actually got the lead. So they were looking great until the fourth quarter comes, and then all of a sudden, inexcusably, they put in Marco F. and Benanelli, and it won't be long now because as soon as they insert Marco, you have Marco and you have Bryn Forbes on the court at the same time. It won't be long. You know what's going to happen. The lead evaporates, and then what happens? The Spurs find themselves down by 6, and pretty much that's all she wrote because it kind of took the team out of rhythm. They couldn't hit their shots. Then the Miami Heat started getting some help from the refs over some questionable calls and just totally took the Spurs out of rhythm. It was hard for them to come back into the game. Then they started making defensive mistakes, little mistakes down the line there near the end of the fourth, and they just couldn't find a way to get themselves back into the game and couldn't get the stops they needed at key moments to really make a push, and that's unfortunate. What were your observations tonight, Wesley?
Well, first off and foremost, you just have to say that the Heat have some great young talent that hasn't really been scouted. It's very Spur-like, right? You've got these guys who came from the G League. You've got a good mix of talent that were drafted and guys that were groomed in the system. But I have to give Eric Spoelstra a lot of credit because this Heat team has for years kind of been around that 500 mark and kind of going about their business ever since the Heatle days. And you just have to look at Spoelstra and say, this guy can flat out coach. He's developing talent. That being said, on the Spurs end, it's a disappointing loss because, like you said, Joe, they had some good defense at times tonight. The part of me that I know you feel the same way is there are things that seem to work very well in the first half with lineups that were going on. You saw an infusion of energy when Lonnie Walker comes in the game. He gets in the paint. He makes a driving layup. He gets his hand around the ball, and everything speeds up. It gets a little faster. The game goes faster. You had a really good night tonight from Patty Mills for the most part, and DeMar DeRozan was flat out amazing. But it really felt like those two guys were the only offensive options at times for the team. And one of the things that I observed the most, Joe, was there was a moment where, watching on the television tonight where Sean and Bill were talking about this. I think the Spurs had like a 17-0 run in the paint at one point where they were just punishing the Heat inside. And then inexplicably into the fourth quarter, there they were jacking up ill-advised shots on the perimeter, shooting air balls, taking contested threes. And I know that we all know that the Spurs need to take more 3-pointers because that's where the league is. But there's a time to take them and a time not to take them. And I really felt like when the Spurs got to a battle and the bench for the Heat were outplaying our guys, and of course that was right about the time that the stinky Bellinelli was in the game. They're destined to lose. So kind of disappointing. Had their opportunities tonight and had a chance to get it done, and quite frankly, just didn't play well enough to win.
Yeah, you said it perfectly there. They just didn't play well enough to win, but they are very capable of playing better than they have been because they've shown us in spurts that they are capable of playing defense. Now that's a big thing though moving forward because you're going to have the rodeo road trip that's coming up here pretty soon, and they need to play consistent defense, especially on the road, in order to get the much needed wins away from the AT&T Center. They have an 8-game home, not a homestand, but a road trip for that rodeo road trip that's coming up, and they're going to be playing some of the better teams in the West. And if they're not firing on all cylinders, it's going to be really hard for them uh, to get these much needed wins to stay competitive in the West. Let's go ahead and read some comments from our listeners here. We have Frank Ramirez. Hey, Frank, what's up, man? He said, tough loss. Doris Campano Basco, what's up, Doris? She says, barbecue did it again. She's referring to my nickname for Bryn Forbes. Yeah, barbecue did it again. We actually handed out some grades for the San Antonio Spurs on our latest Two Shots podcast, which is available right now. You can go ahead and take a listen to that at the Two Shots podcast website. It's two shots, TWOSHOTS podcast.com. And you can look at our homepage, and that episode is up and available for you to listen to right now. And Jason Garcia, what's up, Jason? He says, can we trade LaMarcus and get a high lottery pick? I doubt if we're going to get a high lottery pick for LaMarcus. Nobody's going to want to pick up that salary for this aging former All-Star. Doris says, LaMarcus, shaking my head. And Doris also says, Rudy and Marco and Brim bricking tonight. Look, if here's my gripe with Bryn and with Marco. Bryn is in the starting lineup, and we handed out grades, and we talked about that in more detail on our latest episode of the Two Shots podcast. If Bryn is not knocking down his shots, if he's not knocking down perimeter jump shots, he's not hitting threes consistently, why the hell is he out there on the court? He's a liability on the defensive end. If he's not giving you nothing offensively, you got to yank him out at that point and insert somebody else. Maybe Lonnie Walker. Put him in the game and see what he's going to give you if Bryn isn't being productive. Because at least with Lonnie, if he's not scoring, he's going to go ahead and bring it from a defensive standpoint, which is what the Spurs need. And Bryn is just undersized, and that's the issue that I have with Bryn. I don't have anything against him personally as a person, as a human being. I'm just saying the dude is just 2 inches too short to guard some of the better players out there at any given time. That's a fact. And Marco is the same thing.
He also lacks the lateral quickness. I think that's part of it too. He is shorter than the guys he's defending, but he doesn't move his feet. And I think that's just the thing. He runs around screens. He doesn't shuffle his feet. So
he can't go through the screens. He always has to go around the screens because he's too small and he can't break through. And the sad part is he bulked up in the offseason, and he's still a defensive liability. Now, when it comes to Marco Beninelli is in the same exact situation as Bryn Forbes. If he's not giving you anything offensively, you got to pull him out of the game. But for some reason, if these guys, and somebody had put on Twitter, guys can go 1 for 9 and Pop will give them 25 minutes a game. And that's a head scratcher. It's like, yes, we know they're veteran players, but at the end of the day, if they're not producing, you got to yank them and insert somebody else that will help you get a much needed win on the road. Let's see what Doris says. She goes, Rudy and Marco, okay. Jason says, okay, no. And goes, oh no, we suck again. I don't know if we suck again. I think we're just showing basically who we are at this point. The Spurs are just, like Jonas said on that podcast we recorded yesterday, the Spurs are consistently inconsistent. And the sad part is they look good offensively. It's just the defensive aspect of their game that they need to tighten up. And they're capable of doing it. Are they capable of doing it for 4 full quarters? Probably not. But what they can do is they can help their cause by playing defense at key moments of the games to get you stops at the end of quarters where you can go ahead and start making a run, especially if you're playing from behind. And we haven't seen them be able to do that consistently. And they notoriously, sometimes they'll start the games off slow and they'll have bad first quarters. They'll have bad third quarters. Notoriously, that has been the team's Achilles heel all season. and that doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. We hope it will because it would make life easier for them. But I don't really
Yeah.
see the inclination to that happening.
And the thing is, Joe, too, this is the frustrating part of that, right? You talked about the lineups. The problem is the third quarter every single time. You notice tonight, first quarter, right? 17 points. Now, they played good enough D because they held the Heat to 24, but it's the same lineup. You're talking about the starters. The starters come out in the third, the starters are out there in the first, and that's when the lulls happen. And so if you're Pop, and nobody can say, well, Pop is just trying to, make sure that his guys are ready to come. He goes back to the starters. We've seen Pop shake it up over the years. We've seen times where Pop says, "Hey, you know what? Manu's going to start in the second half." Now I know we don't have a Manu on this team, but you do
I'm gonna
have a
say,
Lonnie Walker.
are
You
you
do
drunk,
have some other
Wesley?
people.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say you're talking about Manu being out on the court. I was like, are you drunk, Wesley?
And no, I mean, there's not a guy out there, but that like that. But there is energy guys, and I just wonder if Pop is not just is people saying he's being stubborn. I laughingly say this, but if this isn't Pop's way of saying we're going to sink or swim, these guys are either going to get it or they're not. But I'm not going to make the change. I look at that and say, I know it's just one loss. People say, chill out, Wes. They've played pretty well. They've beaten some of the better teams. Yes, but what do they have to show for it? That's the problem, is that they are still 5 games under 500. And for them to be successful coming into this rodeo road trip, which, ladies and gents, they may not win a single game. It's going to be tough. It would be tough for any team to play with their schedule on the rodeo road trip and win games. But with that being said, they've got to figure out a way to correct the problems in the third quarter and in the first quarter, because when the bench comes back in the third, but they righted the ship. There you go. Spurs back in the lead. They put the starters back out there on the floor. You've got DeMar, who's just being awesome, and no support. So
Yeah, he
I don't know,
can't do it
Joe.
all on
It just
himself.
seems
Yeah, well, let's
it
read some of
can't.
the stats. Look at what DeMar DeRozan did tonight. He had 30 points. He was a +3 in the plus minus. That really doesn't mean much. It's just a stat they put out there. It means he had a positive effect on the game in his 35 minutes that he played. And to go along with his 30 points, he had 5 rebounds, 7 assists, and 2 steals. But he also had 2 turnovers, so we're gonna put that in the mix as well. I gotta be fair and put all the stats, not just the good ones. Bryn Forbes, he played 26 minutes. He had 11 points on the night, and he also had 2 turnovers. He had 3 personal fouls. He had 2 assists, and he had 1 rebound. Now we go back to LaMarcus Aldridge. LaMarcus Aldridge had a very quiet game. He really didn't even look like he was going to break the double digit mark for the night. But late in the fourth, he was able to knock down some shots, and lo and behold, he scored in double digits. But he was very quiet in this game. He had 12 points on the night. He had 1 turnover. He had 4 personal fouls. He had 1 assist, and he had 5 rebounds. That's really not going to cut it out of your one of your stars, that you have on the team. And not only that, but one of your starters that you really rely on, especially down in the paint, to knock down these perimeter jump shots. If anything, DeMar DeRozan has been the most consistent player for this Spurs team. So you got to tip your hat to DeMar DeRozan because he's been playing really good basketball. In fact, he was named the Western Conference Player of the Week for a reason. And then we look at the bench play, and we had an unsung hero here in Patty Mills. Patty Mills has looked really good. He had 21 points on the night. He had 2 fouls, 0 turnovers. He had 1 assist and 1 rebound. And then you had Derek White, who had 11 points. He had three fouls, 1 turnover, 1 block, 2 steals, and 1 assist. So that basically gives you the gist of the scoring load that was shared by the team today. Um, those are okay stats, but you still need to see more production, especially out of your starters. We needed to see a little bit more out of a Trey Lyles. DeJounte Murray only had 4 points on the night as your starting point guard, and that's really not going to cut it. We need him to score a little bit more. I think he looks first to distribute the ball more than he looks to score. And it's a shame because DeJounte really has a nice jump shot. You want to see him take more of those open jumpers instead of deferring the ball to get DeMar DeRozan or LaMarcus Aldridge, you know, uh, going. He wants to get them going early. I understand the logic behind it, but if you have an open shot, shoot your shot. You're going to help the team by putting points up there. So it's a conundrum that the Spurs are in. It's no easy fix. It's always something that needs to be tweaked, something that needs to be worked on, and we're already officially, guys, at the halfway mark of the season. So I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Hutch and I asked Jonas yesterday when we recorded the Two Shots podcast. What grade would you give the Spurs at the official halfway mark of the season, Wesley?
An F, no doubt about it.
Oh, really? You
And
give them an F?
yeah, Joe. Because I mean, look, this is a team that dang near won 50 games last year. 50. They are at 48 wins last year. There's no excuse for them to be anywhere 5 games under 500. I know recently the heartstrings would tell you, okay, they beat Milwaukee, yeah, great win. They beat Boston in Boston, yeah, you're right, that's a great win. They beat Toronto, that's a great win. But they lost to Memphis, a team that they needed to beat, that is playing the same record type of type of basketball right now. And they've lost to the Cavaliers. They've lost. You just go up and down the row of teams that they've lost to this year, and you just go, what are they consistent at? I agree with Jonas in what he was saying about their biggest consistency is they're inconsistent. I would say it just in a little different way. There is no staple thing that this Spurs team is great at. In fact, I'd argue to say that there's nothing that they're really good at. At times they can be a defensive-minded club for stretches. At times they can shoot the three. At times they share the ball and have good assist totals. At times they can be a good rebounding team. But there's not that consistent string of things that they do well enough in order to be a winning basketball club. And even this same team, and let's be honest, other than Davis Bertans, which honestly, as good as he's played this year, I don't think it's made that big of a difference for them. So you look at the same thing, and as a team that won 48 games, they're on target this year for what, 35 maybe,
Well,
34,
if they keep
33?
their current pace, I remember looking at the stats machine there, and it was saying that the Spurs are on pace to win anywhere between 29 all the way up to 34 games if they continue with losing one, winning one, maybe winning two, losing one. If they continue that trend, that's exactly what's going to happen, and that's good enough to probably get them either anywhere between maybe the 13th to the 15th pick in the lottery. So you have that, I guess, to look forward to.
Yeah, and again, that's not discounting the players. There's talent in the NBA, and especially coming out of the college and out of the foreign clubs that play. They'll find somebody if they do get that kind of a pick to be a contributor. But I look at a team. That's why, Joe, it really ticks me off. I look at a team like the Heat. I look at a team like, let's talk about the Grizzlies for a second.
Oh yeah.
These are young, talented teams that are playing their young
Don't forget the
talent.
Jazz too. The Jazz have been on the
The
tear lately.
Jazz. Yes. And you're talking about teams that have 1 year, 2 year players that are letting them figure it out. The Heat should not be doing as well as they are. They shouldn't be one loss only at home. Not with the team of guys that really are, Tyler Hero who did not play tonight
Maybe
is a
that's a
stud.
credit to
And
their coach, Eric Spoelstra. Eric is a decent coach, man. So he's got that
yeah,
team playing good together.
for sure. And likewise, you looked at what happened the other night in Memphis, and I couldn't help but go to work the next day and tell my coworkers, look, Memphis is going to be a dominant team in the Western Conference in the near future because they've got young talent. I look at that. I realize the Spurs are developing Keldon. I know Jonas, if he were sitting here with us right now, would be shaking his head because he covers them in the G League. But, that's the difference. The Spurs don't let their younger guys figure it out. They want to let them develop behind the scenes. And sometimes when you're in the position that they're in now, which we haven't seen the Spurs be in many, many years, decades, maybe it's time to let them figure it out because what's it going to hurt? Yes, you still have a proverbial shot at the eighth seed, but they've not shown any consistency to be able to move up past about 4 games under 500, 5 games under 500, 6 games under 500. It's been just teetering back and forth. So yeah, an F because I don't know that there's really anything that they shouldn't be able to do well considering that they did that last year.
Yeah, one of our viewers, Clay the Shooter on YouTube, he's saying none for Rookie of the Year. And he's referring to Kendrick Nunn because if you look at the stats that he was able to put up for the night for the Miami Heat, he had 33 points on the night, and he also had uh, 2 steals, 4 assists, and 3 blocks. But the young man did a hell of a job from an offensive standpoint, scoring 33 points. I mean, the Spurs really had no answer for that guy. He was able to just put it on them, and they really just couldn't keep up with him defensively. He just went off.
Joe,
So
Joe, let me ask you a question because this goes towards that, right? So he's 6'2", Kendrick Nunn, right? 6'2", undrafted, did well in the G League. Obviously, he's developed from his game in the G League, but he's going against two guys that were thought coming into the season that were going to be a dominant defensive presence at the point guard that the Spurs hadn't seen in years in Derek White and DeJounte Murray. Let me ask you this. Did you see this coming where these two guys wouldn't have the type of season that we would expect, especially on the defensive end? Did you see this coming?
as far as what Derek White goes
And
Brent,
DeJounte having the deep, getting. I mean, look, let's just be honest. They got tore up tonight by a 6'2" point guard who is certainly, to his credit, he is a rookie of the year candidate, no doubt. But these are guys, Derek and DeJounte, that we thought were going to be difference makers on the defensive end, especially for the Spurs this year.
I think it's hard for them to actually live up to those expectations because I think what happens is that they would play defense better if they were on the court together because they would be able to
Yeah.
help each other. But when you have one and DeJounte Murray, who's your starting point guard, out there in the starting lineup, and you look over and you got Brent Forbes who can't guard anybody, and you're called upon to try to have to do his job and your job and distribute the ball and score. What happens with DeJounte is DeJounte is a good point guard. The problem is he gets caught having to try to do too many things and force the issue because he really wants to help this team win. He doesn't really have any help in that regards. I think if they were, and I had said it before, I think if they were to insert Derek White and DeJounte Murray into that starting lineup, you could have Derek run the point, and then he would be able to distribute the ball more to a DeJounte Murray, which would allow DeJounte Murray to be more effective not only on offense but also as a defender. Because then you would
Yes.
have more of that distribution load fall under the weight of Derek White, which Derek White I think does a better job as far as his court vision and distribution of the basketball than DeJounte Murray does. But DeJounte Murray's still young and he's still learning, and he's going to get better. I have no doubt that he'll come into his own. He needs a little bit more time. But that's the issue with them. It's the personnel that they have around them that kind of hampers what they're able to do out there on the court. It's those rotations, and I see why Pop has to go with certain rotations, especially with Derek coming off the bench, because Derek is called upon to lead that second unit, and they really rely on him heavily to not only help with the flow of the offense, but also to distribute that ball. So you have that. Who else are you going to have as your point guard coming off the bench if you insert Derek and you have DeJounte on the court at the same time? You're going to put in Lonnie Walker. Lonnie Walker's more of a shooting guard. He's going to get out there in the open court and he's going to give you all this offense, and that's where he excels and that's where he does great. And I want to see him do more of that. So I think if they were to kind of call upon Lonnie to play the point, that would kind of hamper what he's able to do out there on the court. So those that's what you're left with, Wesley. It's like what else are you going to do? You see the conundrum that Coach Pop is in, having to play with these lineups. It's a dicey situation, man.
Yeah, I just look at back and I think Patty is a shooting guard, although he's in a point guard's body. Bryn is a shooting guard in a point guard's body. You've got Derek and DJ who are really long, lean, athletic, which nowadays is what your point guards are. So, I mean, it's a little bit of everything. I think you're right. I agree with you 100%. It's the lineups around them. And I've been calling for it all year for those two boys to get a chance to play together. DJ and Derek, in the short time they've gotten to play, have looked really great. So I don't know. I guess it's frustrating to some extent because we know that Pop is is really he's really the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. But I feel like it's kind of like this is the line in the sand. We're not going past this line. This is how it's going to be. And, night in and night out, we're going to kind of see this as long as that happens, if that's the same rotation that we're going to see.
Look, one of our viewers, Joanne Hernandez on Facebook, she says Forbes equals Dookie. She used the poo emoji. when he's not giving you points out there consistently, yeah, he is Dookie out there on the court. I ain't gonna lie. But before we go ahead and wind up ending this episode of the Spurs Takeover, let's read some of the team stats that the Spurs had tonight. The Spurs, as a team, shot 43.8% from the field. They connected on 39 of 89 of their field goal attempts. From beyond the arc, the Spurs shot 10 of 33, and that was good enough for 30.3% from beyond the arc. From the stripe, the Spurs shot 12 of 15 for 80%. As far as the rebounds, the Heat had the rebounding edge over the Spurs, 41 to 49. Now assists, the Heat had the edge over the Spurs in that department, 26 to 22. And points in the paint, Spurs had the edge over the Heat in that department. As far as points in the paint, they had the edge over the Heat, 44 to 32. Fast break points, the Spurs had the edge over the Heat, 10 to 5. When you're looking at all these stats, it should tell you, hey, you should have won this game, but they just couldn't get the stops they needed defensively, and then they couldn't find their shot to save their lives in the beginning of that fourth quarter either. I take it, yes, I understand the refs helped the Heat a little bit in that regards, but the Heat are playing at home. You're going to have to find ways to score. You're going to just have to go ahead and play through it, and what I think the Spurs did, especially in the beginning of that fourth quarter, they fell in love with the three. You can easily just forego shooting the three and shoot a jump shot, 17-foot jump shot, 15-foot jumper. It's going to get you points. Don't fall in love with the three. Yes, that's the evolution of today's NBA. But if you can consistently hit a jump shot, you're going to be fine. You're going to find ways to score. And if that jump shot's not falling, you're not able to knock shots down from beyond the arc, put your head down, go to the rim, be aggressive, get the foul, and go to the stripe. That way you slow the game down, you stop the other team's momentum, and you're able to put some buckets, some points up there on the board. So you're still having a positive impact on what your team wants to do as far as winning the game. And I think that the Spurs a lot of times get away from that. They fall in love with the three. They fall in love with the ISO ball a lot as well, where they start getting away from setting the screens, setting those little pick and pops, little pick and pop plays, give and go. When they start just standing around, that's when they get in trouble. When the ball sticks, bad things happen. You have to consistently move that ball around the perimeter to get yourself a good look. And I think that the Spurs are their own worst enemy in that regards, because we see them fall into bad habits almost every single time. And I don't think that's going to change, and that's the frustrating part to Spurs fans, So that's all I got to say in regards to that, Wesley. So in closing here, final thoughts.
Well, I still wait for the Spurs to find a little bit of mental toughness. I mean, to me, what we want to see going forward in the second half of the season, if this is going to be a team that makes the playoffs, they're going to have to get a lot tougher. They're going to have to find ways to win games when they don't have a jump shot going. You hit it right on the head, Joe, when you said they had chances to go into the paint. They couldn't find a shot. They had chances to hit open jump shots. They couldn't do it. They had untimely turnovers. They had rebounds that they missed, and just bad assignments. And so I look at this and I say, this is a loss that we've come to be a little too familiar with. It's lackadaisical, unfocused at moments when they needed to have their best. And unfortunately, night to night, we don't know which type of the Spurs we're going to get. So I hope it gets better. I'll be at the game on Friday. It's my son's birthday present. So my 6-year-old son, William, what's up, William? Yep. We're going to enjoy the game and get to see Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks. So hopefully they put it back together and we get a chance to see them have a little bit more focus and come out with a win.
Yeah, that's going to be a good game too, because the Hawks they play the Spurs tough, and the Spurs have some
Yeah.
issues with them, especially this season, even going back to last season. So it's going to be a good game no matter what. Maybe you'd be looking into one of those overtime games again.
Hey, I'll take it, man. I don't get too many games, and so if we get a little extra time, that's always awesome too.
Yeah, well, we also have some tickets for sale because we're partnered with the San Antonio Spurs this season. We've been partnering with them for the last 4 years. Shout out to our ticket rep, Danny Farias, out there and the San Antonio Spurs organization. We work together to bring some great ticket deals for our fans. So make sure you go ahead and check that out. We have the link to that as a pinned post over on our Twitter account at Two Shots Podcast. So you can check that out on Twitter. It's Two Shots Podcast, TWOSHOTS Podcast. And you can look at that ticket deal. Tickets start at $19.50. You can actually even sit in the lower level. I think those tickets start in the neighborhood of $59.50. That's for the January 24th game, which is on a Friday. Usually on Fridays, it's going to be a good time because they have a live band out there in the courtyard, the Bud Light courtyard. So you get a live halftime performance out there in the Bud Light courtyard, and then you come out after the game. They have drink specials. You get to hear the live band again. It's a good time. I enjoy myself, so I'll be out there enjoying the game. So make sure you go ahead and check out that link if you're interested in, coming out and watching the game with us. So that's always fun. And also make sure to check out our new episode that we dropped of the Two Shots Podcast. That's up now on the Two Shots Podcast website. And that's twoshotspodcast.com, so make sure to check that out. So we're going to go ahead and end it there. And Wesley, before we go ahead and end the show, where can they reach you on social media?
Yeah, at Wesley Perk on Twitter. Just been talking a whole bunch lately about the whole Cowboy situation, and it's good times ahead. I'm happy. People have differing opinions, but he's putting together a great coaching staff. Bad time to be a sports fan in the city of Houston. Good Lord, just a lot of terrible things going on, and if the best choice and the best chance for you is the Houston Rockets, it's never good. But nonetheless, yeah, love to talk some sports and talk some Spurs and talk some college basketball. Also, you can look me up, Wesley Perkins, on Facebook.
Yeah, and also make sure to check out our friends over at the Project Spurs Network and also at projectspurs.com. So you can go ahead and check all the great content that they have out there. So you can get your Spurs news and your Spurs fix. And not only that, but they also cover the landscape of, local San Antonio sports, anywhere from college basketball, college football, to local high school football and basketball, and even sometimes wrestling. And they also cover the San Antonio Rampage and the San Antonio FC. So make sure you check out all that content over there. So for Wesley Perkins, I'm Joe Garcia. Thank you for watching another episode of the Spurs Takeover. And like we always say, spread the love, stop the hate, be kind, we're out, peace.